And so when I'm at my very lowest, I try to think about that and just hang on to that. But I also don't want to say, we can fall into the trap of also ignoring the fact that it's really, really crappy. And
Sure.
we don't want to do that. We want to, like I tell people, I live in two places at once, where I'm living in the crappiness, the difficulty, the darkness, but I'm also living in the light. I'm finding those bits of light to hang on to and to focus on. So there's a tension there, but I find it very effective for dealing with the flare-ups and just the everyday challenges. Our minds and our bodies are deeply connected, and we can often make our symptoms worse when our mental health is not ideal, and vice versa. It's just this cycle, right? So what we often have control over or have agency over is our mental health. When we're dealing with a condition like this, the physical side, we might not see as easily where we have agency, and sometimes we don't. These things just kind of happen. Our bodies are, they do things that sometimes make me laugh. They're so absurd. What can we work on, and what can we work on that's going to have an impact? And that really is our mental health. One of the lessons I've learned through all of it is that grief is a huge part of diagnosis, and it's something that you're always going to be working with in one way or another.
Hi, and welcome to the Bouncing Back podcast. I'm your host, Melissa McCurley, and after my own battle with autoimmune disease, I created this podcast to share tools, strategies, and inspiring stories for professionals navigating life and business with chronic illness. If you haven't yet, please join our Facebook community, Bouncing Back Podcast, where we continue this conversation. I am super excited to introduce to you our guest today, Meagan Harold. She is informed and inspired by her own journey. She was diagnosed at 24 with rheumatoid arthritis, and she's since become an integrative mental health and registered health coach who works with people navigating life with chronic illness. So Meagan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so grateful to have you. I'm so excited to start to get into the work you're doing and the foundations you're using for your clients. But can we start with just your personal journey? That's so young to be diagnosed with autoimmune. How did that show up in your life? Kind of what was going on with you at the time? And then how did that transition into the path you're on now?
Sure. Wow. So I apologize if I get a little emotional talking about it, because it was a really hard time. So like you said, I was 24, so I was pretty young. And it began the December of 2016. And I had recently moved from Minnesota to Washington State, so I had undergone a big life change. And I also had a bit of a career change as well. So I was in a new job, whole new state, lots of new and exciting things, just feeling very excited about life and about my future. And then I was traveling to visit my family over Christmas, and I started to get some pain in one of my knees. It was a little swollen looking, and that's odd, but I must have, twisted it when I was traveling, who knows, carrying big suitcases, what have you. So I just kind of ignored it, and it went away after a while. Came home from traveling, life went on as normal. And then I started noticing the same pain and swelling in one of my wrists. And I was like, I don't remember doing anything to that. That's weird. And so again, it kind of went away after a while. And then it happened in the other wrist. And I was like, okay, this is starting to seem a little weird. And then again, kind of just went with it, because you can always think of reasons why this happens, right?
Your mind doesn't go to, maybe I have RA. I'm 24. Yeah.
No.
That's not in the pantheon.
Yes. I'm just I keep injuring myself somehow. I'm so clumsy. And then it was starting to happen in one of my shoulders. And that by far was the worst inflammation and pain that I had had. My shoulder was so swollen that I couldn't lift my arm above waist level. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, this is something. Something's going on. And so it happened in one shoulder, then it happened in the other shoulder. And finally I was like, okay, I need to go to the doctor. So I went and saw my new primary care doctor because I just moved to a new city.
Yeah, right.
And she sent me directly to a rheumatologist. Thank goodness.
Thank
And
goodness. That
then
was a pretty direct line. Yeah.
it was. But when I went to see the rheumatologist, she's like, your symptoms are similar to rheumatoid arthritis or another rheumatologic condition, so let's do some blood tests. We started there. Blood tests came back and showed signs of rheumatoid arthritis. But she was skeptical because my symptoms did not fit directly with what is expected.
Hmm.
And so I kind of went through the 6 month period of going to multiple appointments, doing multiple tests. Ultimately, I got an MRI that confirmed the diagnosis, but it really gave me a taste of what it feels like when something is wrong, you're in pain, and your doctor it doesn't seem like she really believed me or really understood what
Yeah.
was going on. So that was challenging, not fun. And I went through all of that, got the diagnosis, and with the diagnosis came relief that I had an answer. I knew what was going on. And then it was like, oh man, this is something I have to deal with for the rest of my life. What does this
Yeah.
mean? How do I handle it? And so there was all of this overwhelm, and it just kind of started my journey, and it's been a long one for sure.
Did you have any frame of reference for rheumatoid arthritis? Did you have to like go Google it and be like, what is this? Like,
Yeah, I had no frame of reference. I did not know what it was, so I really had to do a deep dive to build my understanding. And quite frankly, I was sort of in denial at the time about it.
yeah.
It was so overwhelming to me that it was hard for me to really dive in deep. So it actually probably took me about a year before I really started to tackle it.
Yeah. I know that was true for me, and I was much older. I can imagine for you, I would think part of the inner dialogue would be like, I'm too young, right? I can't imagine. I didn't have that one because I was in my 40s, but I did that. I had a lot of denial too. I lived with a lot of pain for a while. I looked up things and I was like, oh, it's not this. Oh, it's that. And I hear this from a lot of the guests. I think maybe that's part of the grief process. Is the denial phase, and I think a lot sooner we can get out of it. I think I was in it for like 2.5 years. I was in it for a while. The sooner we can get out of it, we can get productive. But I do think that's a part of it, and I can only imagine being as young as you were, not having a peer group that reflected any of this back to you. It would just be that much harder. So kudos to you for it only taking a year. I think that's actually pretty outstanding.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
100%. Denial is, one of the so-called phases of grief. And so
Right.
it's 100% part of the process. And really one of the lessons I've learned through all of it is that grief is a huge part of diagnosis, and it's something that you're always going to be working with in one way or another. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because as you know, and our audience knows that you have flare-ups. You go through as
Yep.
life moves through, and we have stresses and we have changes that it circles back, and every time it circles back in a way that doesn't feel so great, we do kind of go through that again. The why me and the denial and yeah. And I don't know
Mhm.
if you've experienced this too, but like I'm gluten free because I have psoriatic arthritis, so
Mhm.
it's different from RA. But and I'm gluten free, and I try very hard not to eat sugar. I don't drink alcohol. There's a lot of things I don't eat, not because I don't want to. I used to be a foodie, but it's just that took some. It was pretty quick. The feedback's pretty quick, right, with your hands, like whether something's good for you or not. And I know sometimes I encounter people who challenge who when I kind of explain, hey, well, they're like, why don't you eat this? Oh, I have this thing. It's all psoriatic arthritis. I have my elevator pitch, right? And then they kind of challenge, well, what would happen if you just ate whatever? Like they get kind of confrontational. And I'm like, you think I haven't tried that? You think I didn't, there have been Christmases where I'm like, screw it, and I eat what I want, and then I pay the piper. Like, friend, I don't need you to suggest that to me. Like, I don't know what that's, some not so helpful people sometimes echo that same denial message back to you. And I find that that's sometimes hard to deal with because in an appropriate, constructive way.
It is very hard to deal with. And yeah, one of the things that we really have to grapple with, like with you, food is a huge factor in your flare-ups, and I have other things that I have to really manage from my flare-ups, and so our lives are going to look possibly a little odd to people who are looking from the outside in, and it can be really challenging sometimes, and I just have to remind myself, I mean, it really depends on the person, right? If it's a stranger or an acquaintance, I don't necessarily feel like I need to owe them too much of an explanation for why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then with people who are closer, I feel more comfortable sharing more. And sometimes you still get the well-meaning comments. I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes if I tell someone for the first time that I have rheumatoid arthritis and I'm dealing with a flare-up and pain, they have all kinds of suggestions. And it's
unsolicited advice.
Yeah. Yes, and it's like, yes, I know. I've tried all of this. But yeah, so I just, people generally mean well and people are just trying to understand. So I just try to extend a lot of grace to them and to myself.
Yeah. And they want to help, and
they want to help. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so this experience that was so life-changing for you at 24, how did this pivot you? What was the process of it pivoting you into going into the coaching, mental and physical health coaching?
Sure. So that was a long journey. It really started well before my diagnosis. I experienced mental health issues when I was growing up. And through that journey, I learned a lot about mental health, and I had this drive to support people in any way that I could with their mental health. And when I was going into college, I was selecting between a couple different majors, one of them being in the mental health field, and the other one was actually geology of all things, because in addition to loving mental health and serving people, I also have a love of nature and rocks. So
cool.
When I was choosing between those two, I ultimately went for geology. So that's what my degree is in.
Okay.
So even though I made that decision, went through college, went into my career, discovered that geology, working in that field, maybe wasn't the best fit for me, I always had this inkling in the back of my head that I wanted to do something to support people directly. So when I was actually diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, I was going through a career change and really just kind of looking at things. And so I got the diagnosis, and then I was in a job that was it was new to me, but it was fairly simple and not very stressful. And I just when I got my diagnosis, I was like, okay, I just need to stay in this and just be in this, figure things out, figure out my health. And so I did that for quite a while and stayed on that career path, but I still had that inkling in the back of my head. And then the pandemic happened, and as many of us, I'm sure, can relate to, I had a lot of time to think and ponder and evaluate. And I had come to a place of healing with my mental health and my RA, where I was like, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to do something. Let's figure out what I can do. And so that's when I came across mental health coaching, which, similar to therapy, you're helping support people with their mental well-being, but in a different capacity. Okay. And then, so I went through that program, and I knew right away, I want to use this to support people like me. And I just think about where I was when I was diagnosed. What did I need? I needed someone to stand beside me when I'm, in that phase of denial and be like, it's okay that you're grieving. This is a big thing. Let me help you walk through this step by step. Let me help you look at how this is changing your day-to-day life. Let's tackle this additional stress, this emotional turmoil, and mostly just show you that you're not alone and you have more agency than you think. So that's really what I want to do with my coaching.
I love the word that you just said, agency. So that was kind of my mantra. Before I got sick, I had been to like several Tony Robbins events, right? Like I was very deep into personal growth and business. I'm a realtor, and so you're a business owner, you deal with people, it's a high stress job. So there's a lot of time and money and effort spent on growing yourself and developing yourself so you can show up to all those things, in a really productive, healthy way. And so when there was for me, there was a window of time where I was in bed, like I was definitely bed bound, like at least 4 days a week. And I was in so much pain because I also had pain like neck and migraine and vertigo stuff where it was physically, like I couldn't listen to an audiobook. Like I love to read. It's probably my favorite pastime, that and knitting. And I couldn't even listen to an audiobook because it caused physical pain for me. Like that's hard to explain now to anybody, but it's even hard to remember to go back, except for I remember it very clearly. And I even made some voice recordings during that window of time so I could just remember being in that space. But I would ask myself, like, what do I have agency over today? What? Even if it was just like, I don't know, to let my mom come visit me or listen to a little bit of music, or it was a point in the day where I could get up and make broth or something. And just even that question of identifying, because we always have agency over something, even if it's just our thoughts. But it doesn't feel like that, when you're so shifted away from the contrast of what you were doing to what you are. And I think that highlighting that and just having people ask, what do I have agency over today? And then building something from that, because there is always something.
100%. You really hit the nail on the head. Agency is huge. And I am super impressed that you discovered that when you were dealing with your, in the throes of your illness, because it makes a huge difference. One of the worst states that we can be in as human beings is helplessness. And they've actually found through studies that when we're in helplessness and despair, it actually makes our health worse. So the more that we can find that, and it's hard because, like you said, when you can't even listen to an audiobook, it's like, what do you mean I have agency? What do you mean that I'm not helpless? And I mean, yeah, point taken. It's you're in a state where you don't have a lot of control, but there's always something there. And like you said, at the very minimum, you can have agency in your thoughts, how you are responding to what's happening to you. And I often think about Viktor Frankl and how
A Man's Search for Meaning. That's what I thought too. I was like, at least I'm not in a concentration camp. I mean,
Right, you're not in a concentration camp, and even if you are, he
survived it.
He survived it, and part of how he did that was by finding where he had agency, and that was how he was reacting to what was happening to him, by reacting with love and just not letting it break his spirit. And so when I'm at my very lowest, I try to think about that and just hang on to that. But I also don't want to say, because we can fall into the trap of also ignoring the fact that it's really, really crappy. And we don't want to do that. We want to, like I tell people, I live in 2 places at once, where I'm living in the crappiness, the difficulty, the darkness, but I'm also living in the light. I'm finding those bits of light to hang on to and to focus on. So there's a tension there, but I find it very effective for dealing with the flare-ups and just the everyday challenges.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as a dance. Like, there's this darkness here, I'm not feeling well, and I find that journaling helps a lot. It'll just sort of move the emotion of it out of the way. Because if I'm in the emotion of how bad it is, it's hard, like you said, to find the agency or even care about the agency. Yeah, but knowing that they both can coexist, and knowing that that agency's there no matter how bad you feel. If people who haven't listened to that book or read it, please go get it. It's so good. Do yourself a favor. I was lucky I'd had the inputs of things like that before I got sick to draw on, that were there for me, whenever because I was sick during COVID. So I had to sell my home in Mexico. I moved back to family property in the country. So I was surrounded by like nobody. Like I didn't have community. Everything was shut down. Living in the country. Like, my parents are both like far away for not like an hour. It was hard. So I didn't, it was kind of like I was going through it alone. But having something like that you know about to draw on helps. So with your clients, how do you help them find their agency? Do you have a structure for that, or conversation starters? Do they give you pushback at first? Like, how does that go for people?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I don't have like an established structure in place. It just kind of comes with the conversation. So, for example, I had a client the other day say, "Oh, I'm starting a flare up, and I was hoping to go work out with my sister this evening, but I'm too tired, I'm too fatigued." I was like, "Okay, that makes sense. But what else can you do?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" I was just planning on like laying on the couch, and I'm like, "Okay, well you can do that, but would you be up to doing some other type of movement?" There are a whole bunch of different options out there. You could even do a yoga exercise where you're sitting or lying down. There are, different flows that you can do for that. So I try to help clients notice when they're having all or nothing thinking when it comes to their flare-ups, because that's really easy to get into.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I used to do this all the time, and it took me time to realize, that there might be an alternative solution. Just because I currently can't drive doesn't mean I can't connect with my friend in some way. Sure, we can't go out for coffee, but maybe we can have coffee over Zoom, etc. So, yeah, that's kind of how I work with clients with that.
That's great. And, just having it suggested, I think,
Yeah.
because when you are in pain or you are in a flare-up, you're not at your most, like, creative, cognitive best.
100%.
So having somebody present to you some options is wonderful. And then they have a door that's opened going forward of other alternatives.
Yeah, and I even encourage clients when they're not in flare-ups, kind of create a toolkit of alternatives that you can have on hand. So I've even suggested, pre-preparing meals to have in the freezer that are on the healthier side, because when we're, in flare-up, we don't really
Yeah.
can't really cook, don't really want to cook, so we tend to eat the not so good stuff. So just plan ahead a little bit and make it, and like you said, our cognition when we're in a flare-up is not great. So what can we do to prepare so that we can just kind of, find the alternatives in an easy way, and it's more likely that we'll do them that way.
I love the idea of having the frozen meals, because it's not a matter of if you get a flare up, it's a matter of when. So
Yes.
having the things, whether that's like frozen broth, healthy meals for the different stages, whatever you need, I love that. So that it's just, maybe it's even, you even label it like flare up broth, flare up food, and then you're just ready to go, and it's easy, and you don't have that decision making process. Yeah,
Yes.
when you go through. Well, I have a note in here that one of the structures that you have for working with clients is called the 5 Foundations of Thriving.
Yeah.
I love foundational things. I love checklists, and I love the word thriving. Obviously, it's in my podcast thing. Can you tell us? So I feel like I'm going to love this, Kim, and it's going to be helpful for the audience. Can you share with us what that is and what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So the 5 foundations for thriving are the baseline that I start with clients, because I found that these are the areas that will often cause me to have a flare up the most. And
Okay.
they're also areas that when you have a chronic illness, it's really hard to prioritize them and manage them. So the foundations are stress management, sleep quality, activity pacing, not doing too much or too little, processing emotions, and then effective self-care. And I know I left nutrition out of there, even though I know that's a big one for you. But I just kind of consider that as part of the effective self-care piece. That's sort of like
Yeah.
the broad
It's
cover
kind of a
all.
given. Yeah. Like if
Yeah,
soda pop aggravates your flare up, like don't drink it. Like
it,
when you're in a flare up.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, I start, when I meet with a new client, I give them these five foundations and just ask, is there something that resonates with you here? Is there an area that you feel like you would like to work on and that would have an impact on your well-being? And then we start there. Now, it's not, we can work on other things too, but this is just sort of a place to start. And I really do find that when you are able to fit these priorities and really focus on them, it really does help with your flare up occurrence, and then also how you are able to manage them when they happen.
Right. That makes great sense. That makes perfect sense. Do you find that it helps people feel like they have more agency over their disease when they have a framework like this to apply to it?
Yes, for sure. And that is, yeah, so that's why we start there because it's sort of like it helps, yeah, like you said, it helps them see that they have agency because they're like, oh, I can actually work on something that can help me feel better. And yeah, so it definitely helps in that regard.
Interesting. I love that. I mean, that makes perfect. That's kind of like a roadmap. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, since you have this, you have so much background in mental health training and experience, personal experience, right, which is the best kind of training in the world. Mental health, and then you have the physical health coaching for the chronic illness people. Could you speak a little bit about how you see the intertwining of the two of them?
Sure.
One impacting the other, or just how that shows up for clients.
Yeah, so I mean, our our mentals, our minds and our bodies are deeply connected. And we can often make our symptoms worse when our mental health is not ideal and vice versa. It's just this cycle, right? So what we often have control over or have agency over is our mental health. When we're dealing with a condition like this, the physical side, we might not see as easily where we have agency, and sometimes we don't. These things just kind of happen. Our bodies are, they do things that sometimes make me laugh. They're so absurd. So so I think, what can we work on, and what can we work on that's going to have an impact? And that really is our mental health. And stress is huge. Emotions play a really huge role in pain and pain perception, which I think
Okay.
is something that a lot of people don't really know about. I've encountered this with clients. So when there's an area of our brain, I don't remember the exact name of it, but it affects how we perceive pain. So it's not like where we initially like have the pain, but it sort of impacts how we perceive it. So
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yeah. No. Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So for example, when I was a kid and I would fall and skin my knee, I would feel that like initial sting, it doesn't feel good, but I'd be all right. I'd be okay. And then I would look down and I would see that it's bleeding. And then I would start to cry. Then it was the worst thing in the world. And so
Right.
what was happening is I had that, initial injury that, caused a pain perception to go into my brain. And then when I saw the blood, I experienced fear. And that fear amplified the pain even more. So the injury didn't get any worse, but how I was perceiving the pain changed. So I try to work with clients when they're in flare up and dealing with pain, just letting them know that your emotions do play a role. It doesn't mean your pain is in your head. That's a fallacy. But you can help how you tolerate the pain by making yourself as relaxed as possible, doing positive self talk, not going into the blame cycle of blaming yourself for what's happening. So,
Right.
Yeah, it's all so interconnected. I think that working on the mental health side is imperative when you're dealing with chronic illness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Um, I use an app called Curable. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but they have some
I
somatic.
haven't.
Oh, look it up. It's really good. They have some
Yeah.
somatic practices that are like quick, like 5, 10, 15 minutes. And so it can really help because they have like meditations they talk you through. So if you start to feel, you feel something coming on, a migraine, or, you're getting some of your symptoms and you start to feel that build and the oh no and the stress around it, they have some somatic practices right there on your phone and an app that helps you just kind of guide yourself down. Because even if you know you're supposed to do it, sometimes it's hard to do it when the momentum starts and you're in a place where maybe you're not and you're sort of happy, safe. Maybe you're at work and you have a meeting or you have something. And they talk a little bit in there when they explain the somatic practices that there's a difference between the physical injury and the experience of pain that our brain gives to us. And they're not necessarily connected or even proportioned to one another. But like you said, connected to your mental health and your feelings and even programming, like how often you have this pathway of pain and that sort of, yeah. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And again, it's not saying it's all in your head. It's saying that your head likes to play games and make it feel worse, or, your head's connected to your heart,
Yes.
But, so for what that's worth, I have found that to be a huge help, to help me calm the emotions.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm gonna have to, write that
$4 a
down.
month.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, for sure. Because I know, like, sometimes, particularly the more emotionally loaded the situation is, sometimes our minds are not our friend. Like, even though we say, I need to calm down, sometimes that can add to the stress. So I always find that some other roadway, like a guided meditation or somebody talking to me, sort of hijacks my own mind, like, goes around it and then drops me into the place I know I need to get to.
Yes, for sure. And somatic practices are really spot on for that. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, can you talk a little bit about support systems?
Yeah.
What kind of support systems do you encourage your clients to have or create, and just the importance of that?
Yeah, so personally, I find support systems just incredibly beneficial. And I encourage my clients to really utilize whatever support they have available. And yes, it is definitely helpful to find support groups, communities of other people who have chronic illness, and and I also encourage them to find people who have chronic illness but don't just want to sit for an hour and complain about it, but but want to, of course we need to complain, that's part of it, but they also want to, look for tips and tricks, encourage each other, find the alternatives, help each other find agency. So I definitely encourage them to find that community, and I provide a free support group for that. I know that there are various other groups out there as well. So yeah, wherever you can find a community of people who are going directly through your experience, that's great. And then it's also really helpful to have friends, family who don't necessarily understand. It's okay, they don't understand exactly what you're going through, but they're supportive and they're understanding and they want to learn from you. And that is incredibly beneficial too. And then I also, and this might seem a little strange, but I also think it's really helpful when you have people in your life who don't know about your condition and
Oh,
you don't talk
interesting.
about it. You don't talk about it. They're just people where you can do something else, live life, not think about it, not talk about it. And so, yeah, you can find support from different people, different kinds of support. It all helps.
That's interesting. So you're like incognito with some people.
Yeah, not that you're like keeping it away from
No,
them,
but
but
you
it's
just,
just like, and
it's tiresome sometimes just having to talk
yeah,
about it and be in the space all the time. And yeah,
yeah, and this will often happen at work, right? Like
I was gonna
we
say, I was
don't
thinking
necessarily,
work.
yeah, we don't necessarily tell all of our coworkers that we have this condition.
Right.
So it's often a place where we can just I'm here to work. I'm here to chit chat. This is just, it's just something, a break from thinking about it.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never thought about that. And I work for myself kind of out of my home, so I don't, have that. But I was in a co-working space for a while, and I had that. And you're right, it is nice. You just get to be yourself, not without it, but without it maybe in the driver's seat.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of nice
Yeah.
for once, for a while. Well, if you, I always love to close with it. We're kind of coming up on our time. You have so much knowledge and insight. What would you say to somebody who maybe isn't working yet with a therapist or with a coach and is considering that? Could you share maybe some of the top benefits that you see coming out of work that might help encourage them of why that might be something, a next step they might want to take?
Yeah, sure. So what is so beautiful about coaching is that it fills a gap in care that I've experienced and I see so many other people experiencing. We have other places we get care, the doctor's office, maybe we go to massage therapy, yoga classes, and they're all great and they're all necessary. But what I find for myself and I see for other people is that we, let's say, go to a yoga class or massage therapy and we feel great in the moment and we feel relaxed and in tune, and then we go home and then we go into our lives and then it all fades away. So what coaching does is it helps you take everything that you learn, all the suggestions that you have from your other care providers, and apply them into your everyday life. I'm sure that many of us have heard, you need to focus on your stress, get your stress level down. You should prioritize sleep and sleep more. But then you're like, well, okay, but how do I do that? How do I actually focus and prioritize my sleep in a way that makes sense for my life, because we all have so much going on. Especially when you have chronic illness, you have even more going on, even more things to navigate and manage. So it helps to have someone help you focus in on, this is the one thing we're going to work on. This is the one habit, one area of change we're going to try to do. And they help you see how you can do it in a tangible way. So yeah, coaching is, it helps you, like I said, fill that gap, and and like you said before, Melissa, when we're dealing with chronic illness or we're in a flare-up, our cognition is not always the best.
Yeah.
So it's another person who can help you see, where you have agency. This thing that might be overwhelming, we can help it not be so overwhelming.
Yeah. And I think everybody knows that experience of going to get an answer from the internet for things like this, and you get 10 different answers to a question, and it honestly just creates more confusion and overwhelm than not having asked the question to begin with. So having somebody to take you through that experience and guide you and help prioritize and help tease out things, I would think has so much benefit.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you?
Sure. You can check out my website. It's tenaciouswellnesscoach.com. You can check out my Instagram and TikTok. They're both at Tenacious Meagan, spelled Meagan. So those are great places to start. Just feel free to email me from my email on my website or message me on Instagram and TikTok.
Perfect. And I'll drop that in the show notes so people can go back to the
Okay.
episode and find it there.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I love everything you had to share. I think that it's so helpful, and I encourage everybody to please work with somebody because we know the value of a coach in a business. So why wouldn't you hire a coach for your health journey? Hello. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in this week. Please rate, review, and like our podcast, and share it to somebody you know who would benefit from the discussions we're having here. And we'll be back in 2 more weeks with more stories of success. So until then, keep bouncing back. If these stories of strength and comeback hit home, you'll want to hear what's next. Click the video on screen to keep learning from our incredible guests on how to bounce back and thrive.